In this video, I'll show you all the techniques you'll need to create a landscape using oil paints. The pink canvas was actually created using gesso, tinted by a little bit of acrylic paint. Gesso helps your canvas have a better surface to adhere to, and also keeps the oil paint from soaking into your canvas. After the gesso dried, I'm using a mixture of titanium white with a little bit of linseed oil. I thin down the titanium white with a little bit of linseed oil, and I use it with a palette knife to apply it to the canvas where I want it specifically to go. In this case, we're going to start with the sky. To smooth this out, I decided to use a 2-inch brush. Brushing in circles helps ensure a nice, thin, even coat. I then use a 2-inch brush and go back and forth to make sure it's nice and smooth. To create the sky, I'm using titanium white, phthalo blue, and a little bit of lamp black. Mix it all together on my palette until I get it exactly the way I want. Using a 2-inch brush makes painting the sky quick and easy. I apply the paint using crisscross strokes. Painting over top of the linseed oil and liquid white mixture allows this to blend very well. You'll see me brushing over the paint that I put on the canvas, and that's actually to blend out a lot of the brush strokes. Again, with this technique, it makes blending out the brush strokes rather simple. It just blends with the paint underneath, the titanium white and the linseed oil, and you get a nice smooth sky. Now, of course, you want some gradation and some different colors in here. So we're going to add a little bit darker mixture to help give it some depth. Mix it up really good with a palette knife. And going back to the 2-inch brush, we're just again going to apply crisscross strokes, and then we'll blend it in. Now, it's okay to make it relatively patchy. It just makes it look more realistic. If it looks too patchy, you just blend it some more. This is a pretty simple process using a 2-inch brush. Now, at this point, you could stop, or if there's more that you want to do to the painting, you could keep going and you could keep adding more and more details. Now, to add clouds to this painting, I want to go ahead and add a little bit of titanium white, cad red, and then a little bit of cad yellow. So we're going to get a slight orange look. And I'm going to apply this paint with this palette knife. The nice thing about clouds is they don't have to be exact. If you get an idea where you want them, you can easily go ahead and blend them out and add more details to them if you wish. And at this point, I'm adding color and applying shape. It's easy to apply the paint this way. You can also go ahead and rub the paint into the canvas to actually help blend it. It mixes really easy, just scrape it on. If you got too much, you can scrape it off. This also helps sometimes if the layer underneath is too thick, so it won't hold the paint well. So you could actually use the palette knife to actually either rub it in or actually take off some of the excess paint. So adding some different colors to the clouds and still developing the shape. So just do layer after layer until you get it the way you like. It's okay for it to be rough at this point, so we're going to grab a 2-inch brush here in a little bit and actually blend this together really nice. The different shades are actually helping with dimension for the painting. The brighter colors typically come forward, the darker colors create shadow. You'll also notice you see a lot of purples in nature. So I'm using a variation of purple for these clouds. Using the orange white for highlights. And then blending it all together. So back to the 2-inch brush, I'm using just the corner of the brush to help blend in some of this chunky paint. Do this by using a very light touch. This is why I'm only using the very corner of the brush. This is one of my favorite parts. This is where the clouds start coming to life and actually looking like real clouds. So you want to be careful doing this. The very bottom of the clouds, where I'm painting right now, is actually very far away, so those are usually the most distant clouds, where the ones up here on the top are usually the closest. Keep that in mind with the layering effect, so the ones in the front cover over top of the ones in the back. I'm using this mop brush as a blender brush. It's got very soft bristles and it actually helps refine the shape of the clouds. I'm using paper towels to wipe off the excess paint. With this technique, you can add all sorts of details. You can go ahead and do something really simple or do something very advanced. With this, I just want to make sure that I show you the techniques that I use to help you go ahead and create your own painting. I'm using a palette knife and grabbing a little bit of titanium white to help for the transition between the sky And I'm gonna go ahead and put some water down here. The water is just gonna be a light version of gray. Just kind of blend it all together. Taking the brush left to right actually gives it nice smooth water. Now I have some mountains that I just roughed in here, just using darker colors. And blending out all the brush marks. So now using titanium white, lamp black, a little bit of phthalo blue, gonna create a nice darker gray to actually help refine the mountain shape. So I'm gonna use a smaller brush to get better detail for this. This part would be very difficult to do with a 2-inch brush. So at this point I want to do some more refined detail. And because I'm using oil paints, it's still wet and very blendable. So I could get this exactly the way I want. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some darker colors for the water. The variation helps give it more of a realistic look. Now because this is off in the distance, you're not going to see much detail. Applying different colors sparingly, you just want to use a little bit of paint when you're doing this, but just to go ahead and show some variation. Wanted to make the bottom of this set of mountains back here darker, so it doesn't blend in with the water so well. Just wanted some separation, and then blending it together. Again, because it's oil paints, it actually still blends really well. I'm just using lighter and darker shades of the mid-tone gray. By adding more titanium white, it makes it lighter, and the variations give it that either white water or kind of wavy effect, where the darker color actually helps show shadow. You could still see some of the pink gesso over here by the bottom base of these mountains or hills. The nice part about oil paints is it actually covers over this really well. So a trick to more realistic water is to vary the shades in color. Although one shade and one color can look nice, it's easy enough to easily take this to the next level. So I'm trying to be relatively careful when applying this water underneath the base of the mountain or the hill. So when you're doing this, of course that's darker and your water's lighter, and you can quickly make your water darker just by grabbing too much of this. So be careful, try to put the paint on sparingly. Now right now I'm adding titanium white for the lighter effect. easier to apply it with the brush because I want it to be smooth. So right now I'm grabbing direct titanium white. It blends really well with the paint already on the canvas. I'm also adding some darker colors and applying that straight to the canvas as well. And again, it's easy enough to blend directly on the canvas. With a 2-inch brush, I'm just going across left to right to go ahead and blend this more thoroughly. This helps it look more like water. At this time, if you see any brush strokes, you could blend those out as well. Now it's time to add a little bit more details. So on my palette, I'm going to mix a little phthalo blue, some cad yellow, a little bit of gray. We're going to go ahead and start adding some shrubbery on these hills back here. Now this is off in a distance, so we don't want to add a lot of detail. So basically what we're doing is adding a little bit of color with a small bit of texture. And that's done by just tapping the canvas. Adding a little bit more cad yellow to get a brighter highlight. And this also helps give it more dimension and separation as well. Now with my palette knife, I'm going to get a small little bit of titanium white. We're going to run it across the bottom of this mountain back here for a water line. Now that's going to mix with the grayish blue water, and that way it's not so distinctive as a bright titanium white. Just using the edge of the palette knife and scraping it onto the canvas. Very easy technique for a waterline. Now I'm carefully going over it with a 2-inch brush to blend it out. Now it's time to start adding trees to our painting. I'm mixing some cad yellow, phthalo blue with a little bit of the lamp black. We want a dark green mixture, and now I'm using a fan brush. Our first tree, we want to establish the height and the thickness. So just tapping in with lengthwise with the fan brush to get an idea where we want this tree trunk to be, and now I'm making it thicker. Then we're going to start filling in the details. With a little paint on a brush, I'm tapping in where I want to see branches. Tapping in will help keep the separation with pine needles, instead of just smearing it where it actually makes it look more like a bit on the globby side. This actually shows a little bit more detail. Now I'm also separating the branches. Most of the time when you look at pine trees, you can see sky and clouds going, on the other side. You can see what's in the background. So I'm trying to emulate this particular painting doing the same thing. So that way we're not covering up that window, if you will. This simple effect actually helps add depth to your painting. Gives it more of a 3D look. Now it's time to add some more trees to this painting. I'm going to make it where you have to look through this whole layer of trees to get to this great view in the distance. So again, I drew the trunk with a paintbrush, and then we're going to go ahead and slowly add the branches and the pine needles. And again, we're using the tapping technique. By not only doing different shades of the different trees, in this case we have lighter in the background, darker in the foreground, it actually creates depth and variation. So it does help create interest. By using a palette knife, now I can refine the trunks on these trees. And it's pretty simple. Just grab a small little bit on the edge of your palette knife and just apply the paint where you want the trunk to be. Now then you want to go back over some of the areas with the fan brush to add some leaves over top of the tree trunk to give it some distance. That way it doesn't look like the tree trunk is right at the very front of the tree. By using a thicker, bigger fan brush with wider bristles, it actually helps add a little bit more detail where the smaller, finer fan brush left off. This is a great way to easily add more detail. You can also go ahead and experiment with different brushes and see what you could come up with and spend as much time on this as you wish. I've had a lot of people ask me how I make these trees, so I'm going to spend a little more time on this so you can actually see how I did it. This brush is a number 6 bristle fan.